I'm a deeply spiritual and political person, to which people tend to respond, aren't those different things? I'm not an evangelist for any specific tradition. I think all spiritualities are describing different faces of the same mystery, and I think there's so much to be learnt from each of them. I used to keep the spiritual and political parts of me separate, but the stronger the visions of capitalism's collateral damage became, the harder it was for me to justify the depoliticization of my spirituality. How could I hold true to my spiritual ideals when I knew they had no model to describe the torment, anguish, and injustice that existed all around me? If I am part of and support a social system that is inherently unjust, how much spiritual development is really possible for me? Can I really preach spiritual liberation for the masses when the majority of the world's inhabitants do not have the basic needs for survival upon which their spiritual growth rests? Even if we collectively avert our eyes to the wretched of the earth, we cannot deny that capitalism has engaged in a systematic spiritual impoverishment of the world. Capitalism required the world to be disenchanted, stripped of its forces, powers, and spirits, so it could be controlled, commodified, and exploited. Uprooted from seeing the earth and cosmos as wondrously alive and animate, from sacred rituals, land, communities, traditions, and ancestors, from a deeply interconnected relational web of human and other than human kin, led to the coarsening and deadening of the spiritual lives of the masses. Jobs are stupefying, relationships vapid, nature just an object, cultures based on consumerism, the arena of politics absurd. And whilst there's been a war on all we hold sacred, there's been a simultaneous sanctification of that which is devilish. We worship the great God capital. Economics is the new theology. Money occupies the role of divinities. Our holy days and rituals are built around consumerism. There are heretics and true believers. Like a missionary project, evangelists spread the gospel of capitalism across the globe. We sacrifice our animals, our land, our people on the altar of the market. Celebrities are sanctified as 21st century saints eligible for worship. Capitalism has its own iconography of advertising and banknotes, the language of hedge funds as incomprehensibly esoteric as religious texts about Trinity. Many corporations have monastic offerings. Work is imbued with a sense of virtue and salvation. Meritocracy, austerity, free trade aren't validated but accepted through faith. Capitalism is, as scholar David Loy put it,
the first truly world religion, binding all corners of the globe into a worldview and set of values whose religious role we overlook only because we insist on seeing them as secular.
Given its universality and power, how is it that spiritual people are not recognizing this system as a major competitor claiming the souls of humanity? How is it that in our struggle for liberation, we find in spiritual groups enemies and not allies? How is it they can defend and perpetuate bloody exploitation rather than being a refuge for the oppressed? Philosopher Karl Marx once wrote that
religion is the opium of the masses, the soul of the soulless world.
Which is an apt description for the way many people practice spirituality today. Whilst I think the internal work many of these communities promote is vital and indispensable, in my many years as part of these spaces, I also came to realize that spirituality is a way through which capitalism can create convenient, governable citizens, turning our locus of control inwards, escaping reality through blissed out serenity, pursuing higher things than these lowly human affairs, putting our faith in the universe, God, or karma to fix things, framing personal hardship as a matter of individual responsibility. It's like a tranquilizer that pacifies concern for the political. But is it not profoundly political that many of the world's worst atrocities, from Nazi Germany to colonization and the Palestinian genocide, are performed in the name of spirituality? Is it not political when all over the world, among Christians, Hindus, Jews, and Muslims, sectarian leaders scour religious creeds to condemn abortions, taxes, and other people's religious, gender, and sexual orientations? Is it not political that major government candidates are using the so-called God strategy to attract support, positioning policies in spiritual terms? Philosopher Antonio Gramsci once wrote that the fate of humanity is mostly determined by the indifferent.
The indifferent are the deadweight of history.
Ignoring our political realities doesn't remove our responsibility, it simply aids and abets the status quo, which is a political act well disguised. And every day we remain silent, refusing to wield our power, terrible things are being done in our names. And of course, most spiritual people absolutely believe in beautiful ideals, justice, the inherent value of all beings, gratitude, sacred nature, acceptance, peacefulness, love. But is belief in justice sufficient when we are citizens of nations that stand on the wrong side of every liberation struggle on earth? How can we preach the inherent value of all beings and be passive observers of human suffering, transphobia, police, and militarized violence? Is it really enough to be grateful for all we have, knowing our privileged lives are built off of the indescribable anguish of billions of our fellow beings? Is preaching the inherent sanctity of nature sufficient when the wars of the 21st century will not be fought over oil, but the earth's very lifeblood? Is acceptance really appropriate when stupefied numbness in the face of calamities has allowed systems of oppression to run wild? What does it mean to love each other whilst supporting systems that crush, exploit, and dehumanize them? In other words, we cannot be mindful and compassionate and love the divine in every being without an awareness of and response to the political realities that encompass our lives. And I know we're each on our individual paths, and sometimes more vapid platitudes are an entry point for something deeper. But if your spirituality, like mine, speaks with spirits, communes with nature, feels deep interconnection and oneness with all of Earth's creatures, it has to wail, it has to rise up, it has to be unreasonable. How passive we've become in our spirituality, how tame, how polite, how inward-looking. It's as if we all want to jump to the resurrection before we've been through the crucifixion. But didn't Jesus die on the cross because he was concerned with the political, when he sat with prostitutes and lepers, ministering to those in need, keeping the company of the outcast and downtrodden, when he exposed the hypocrisy of established religious authorities, partaking in riots, looting, and social unrest, when he said,
"It is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God."
Did the Buddha not challenge the political when he abandoned his privileged life, defied caste, and built a community where wealth and status meant nothing in the pursuit of liberation? Did Muhammad of Arabia not engage in the political when he overthrew tribal hierarchies, declaring all humans radically equal like the teeth of a comb? Looking back now, it seems wild that Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad were considered heretics. We recognize yesterday's heresy is often today's revelation, yet fail to see how today's heresies might become tomorrow's orthodoxy, how one man's heretic can be another man's saint, and how today's revelation may be tomorrow's worn-out creed. How easily we follow spiritual dogma, sterile fundamentalism, pontificating about petty theological debate from our armchairs and academic towers, forgetting that Jesus, Buddha, and Muhammad were willing to be heretics, to defy the norms and values of their time, to stand up for what they believed, even if it meant the loss of their lives, because commitment to justice outweighed adherence to arbitrary rules and regulations. Their political engagement was an extension of their spiritual devotion. They recognized that protest can be a form of prayer, consciousness-raising gospel, lawlessness a ferocious act of love, and that the real struggle is not between Christianity, Buddhism, paganism, Taoism, or Islam. The struggle is between the world's disenfranchised and the materialist religiosity of the elite, who preach a God nirvana and enlightenment of the heavens only, whilst taking possession of the earth for themselves. And I know we're all so tired. We've got jobs to do and kids to feed. I don't want not being political enough to be just another thing on the to-do list, another thing to self-flagellate ourselves for. We each go through periods of relative inner and outer focus, and we all have unique gifts, interests, and passions that pull us towards the work for which we are best suited. But if there's anything my years of seeing spirituality as private and interior have taught me, it's that this isn't the answer. Sure, ignorance may be bliss, but true liberation, true inner peace, comes from a fierce, honest, radical inventory of our social conditions and of ourselves, confronting the blood-stained face of history, standing arm in arm with the struggling masses, with a commitment to and a sacrifice for a love that expresses itself tirelessly in an uncompromising fight for a superstructural overhaul that more closely resembles revolution than reform. The reward for such a faith, love, and passion is to live whilst in these flesh suits, something of the divine life on earth. For the kingdom of God is not to be found in the heavens above or in individual salvation. It is to be found where there is no man nor woman, slave nor free, immigrant nor citizen, black nor white, gay nor straight, no hierarchy, no state, no borders, no ethnicity. It exists wherever the essence of spirit is made tangible in culture, system, community, consciousness, and cosmology. So these days, when people ask me, you're spiritual and political, aren't those different things? I proudly say, I'm a revolutionary spiritualist, a spiritual revolutionary, amongst countless others of the global diaspora, are looking to us and asking the most essential questions of our lives. Who are you, and what did you do whilst the world was burning? What did you love enough to risk and give your life for? Will you continue to acquiesce your spirituality to an unjust system? Or will you be implicated in an awe-inspiring sense of responsibility for the fate of the wretched of the earth? If you like this video, you might like my video on a revolution in our consciousnesses. The best way you can support this channel is via becoming a patron. I've also set up YouTube memberships you can join by clicking the join button below. Liking, sharing, subscribing also really helps. I'd love to hear what your relationship is to spirituality and politics and how they intersect. Thank you so much to Opt Out and C Finlay for editing, and most of all, thank you to my patrons for making this channel possible. I really couldn't do it without you. I wish you all a beautiful day. Bye!